Hi, this is Jordan Reed from Ramshackle Glam, and you are listening to Ramshackle Glam, the audioblog. This story today is called The Love Bomb. I'd never actually heard the term love bombing before it happened to me. After my divorce, I jumped very quickly into dating because I was running away from my feelings, and that seemed like a good idea at the time. It wasn't. They tend to need to be dealt with eventually. I had a couple of mini relationships, and then out of nowhere, or more precisely out of an obnoxiously fancy LA dating app, I fell in love. Here is the story of what happened when I fell completely, utterly, hopelessly in love, and then completely, utterly, hopelessly to pieces when I discovered that nothing, absolutely nothing about my relationship was what it seemed. The performer. A few weeks ago, my therapist said to me something that left me reeling. Jordan, she said, I have known you for years, and you are one of the least authentic people I have ever met. How's that for a compliment? Nice. I protested, of course, but I'm open for a living, I said to her. I write about my life as my job. Sure, she said, but there's a difference between openness and authenticity. You speak about your emotions, but I've never seen you actually feel them. You perform them, and then you smile and put them away. Oh. I do truth tell for a living, and it's as weird of a job as it seems, but it's also less scary than it seems because I package these truths so neatly. I present them in bite-sized pieces that are digestible in 7 minutes or so, 12 if I'm feeling verbose. I'm doing it now. I've already jotted down notes about where I want this story to go and what I want it to mean. I write about airplane crashes while I think I'm in the middle of one. I use the page to make sense of the moment. I wrap up the story, I hit publish, and I send my feelings away into the world along with my words. When writing about my life this past year, the personal posts, if you will, I've written almost exclusively about divorce, and only about those parts of the divorce that I feel I'm entitled to write about. My personal experience, basically, so I don't compromise anyone's privacy but my own. But that hasn't been all that's gone on. This year has been full of sickness, death, the kinds of fears about the future that bring us all to our knees. I am in pain when I allow myself to be. I don't write about these things because, most importantly, they don't feel like mine to write about, but also because I don't know how. There are no neat ways to package such stories. And if I'm going to put myself through the agony of feeling these particular feelings, I'd really like to be able to send them away when I'm done with them. Hit publish. Get them out. Make them go. But I can't. And so I don't. And so they stay where they are. Hidden. You are not authentic. I am not. I'm in love. Have I told you that? Of course I haven't, but I bet a lot of you have guessed based on my constant glowy-faced, opaquely worded Instagram stories. Life is beautiful and such. But I am in love. Truly, madly, deeply, reciprocally, the whole thing. In a way that I didn't think was possible for adults who really should know better. In a way that I certainly didn't think was possible for me. There's another story that I can't wrap up with a bow, and so cannot bring myself to talk about. I don't know where it goes. I don't know what it means, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't have an ending. I began with my therapist, and so with her is where I'll end. Packaging. She was asking me about how I got started blogging, and I told her the 5-minute version. I met this famous for being on the internet blogger at a party, and then she and her colleagues asked me to come on board with their life casting concept, basically blogging. How did they pick you, she asked. Like, what was the application process for that kind of thing? Oh, I said, well, they told me to put together a few posts, figure out who my character would be. I decided to be the domestic goddess. I put together a binder with a bio, suggested posts, potential partnership concepts. I laughed. My therapist did not. So, wait, she said, you made a binder of your character? I did. And then I got the job, and I'm doing it still. It's not that the posts I wrote way back then or the posts I've written on this site ever since weren't true. They were, and they are. But they're all just pieces of a much bigger, much more complicated, and much less palatable story. The story of a person who doesn't fit inside of a binder, and never did. I lied. I said I was ending with my therapist, but there's one more thing I want to tell you. The other night, I was with my boyfriend, which feels like a silly word, but what can you do, at his apartment, and I started crying. For no apparent reason, which is an embarrassing reason to cry in front of someone relatively new to your life. You don't want to look crazy, You want to stay in your binder. I felt myself start to pull back the tears, start to flutter my hands at my face to dry it, start to laugh, start to apologize, fix my makeup, distract. But even in the middle of all those tears, I remembered what my therapist said, and so I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I cried for way too long and way too hard. At some point, it felt like something deep inside my chest cracked open and let out waves of poison that couldn't stay in my body for one moment longer or I would die. He held me, and eventually I stopped. I didn't apologize or try to explain. I just stopped because I was done. And do you know what he said to me then? Thank you. Two weeks later, the shame. I've been writing and talking a lot these past few weeks about vulnerability, authenticity. And the realizations I've had about myself as a result of all this writing and talking have been pretty fucking humbling. So, because I cannot write or talk about anything else, I'm going to tell you what happened. I have realized, as I said in that post where I talked about falling in love a couple of weeks ago, that while it's extremely easy for me to be open, it is not easy for me to be authentic, to show the people in my life the real me and all its complicated unprettiness. I know how people want me to act, and so that's what I do. And if I deviate from this performance, if I'm in a bad mood or depressed, I apologize, and then I fix it. Because, of course, I am frightened that if I stray from the script, the people I love will leave me. I have spent my life firmly believing that I can only be loved conditionally. I have chosen man after man who loved me, sure, but who also needed me in very concrete, logistical, and often financial ways. I told myself that I was helping them because I loved them. But the truth is, I was also helping them so that I could keep them. Because if all I have to give someone is me, well, that's clearly not going to be enough. And then I fell in love. I know you probably don't believe me. That's okay. I wouldn't believe me either. But I was in love, so much so that it poured out of me in waves. I told everyone because I had to. I told the internet, even though I knew better. It felt like I'd been awake for years and was finally allowed to rest. It felt like at last I had a reason for everything that had happened, something I could point to and say, this is why. It felt so good. I talked to my therapist about this at length, of course. I told her how I had this knee-jerk desire to send him, my boyfriend, posts I'd written on various topics so we could skip ahead towards understanding each other. I'm better at writing about things than I am at talking. I always have been. I didn't want to mess anything up with my in-real-life inelegance. Stop, she said. Do not do that. Let him learn about you, not from your tidy little gift boxes of stories. And so I made a decision. For perhaps the very first time in my life, I would come out of the gate very simply as myself. I would not perform because I didn't want to do that anymore. And because I believed that with this man, I could finally stop acting. I did it. I stopped. And he left me. So suddenly and so cruelly that it felt very literally and viscerally, like I had been hit in the face so hard it left me spinning. Wednesday. There are mutual professions of true love, concrete plans for the future, just as it has been practically from the moment we met. We know we're acting crazy. We laugh at ourselves for how hard and how fast we've fallen. We also just know. Thursday. He goes to a series of 4th of July events with his ex-wife and children. I admire him for this, and I tell him so. He tells me he wants to know where I'll be later so he can come to me, but then afterwards keeps getting pushed after and after and after, and eventually I need to sleep, so I tell myself he is prioritizing his kids. They wanted him to watch the fireworks with them. He did that because he is a great dad. Then he fell asleep somewhere or other. I ignore how drunk he sounded all day. Friday. I'm sitting in my living room, writing about couches for a client, and I get a series of texts. Here is what they say. His ex-wife asked for him back. He's going to give it a try, just to see if it can work. He doesn't think it will. He loves me. He doesn't love her. It's too complicated for him to explain any more fully. I need to trust him. Hours later, we talk on the phone for 2 minutes. He says he has made his decision. A 7.1 earthquake hits at the moment I hang up, which makes for a lovely metaphor. The earth rolling under my feet as I wonder whether what I'm feeling is even real. More texts, more promises that he loves me. He just has to see. He's so scared he'll find out he was wrong and it'll be too late. I'll be gone. Saturday. It's late, almost midnight, and my phone dings, jarring me from my half sleep. He wants to talk. He has to tell me something important. He's been lying. He's not going back to his ex. He just doesn't love me. He's been lying. He does this sometimes. He gets excited about people. Until, I suppose, he's not. I am terrified to write about this, of course. I know what's coming. You're so stupid. You weren't really in love. You're almost 40 years old. How could you act like this? You. So let me save you the trouble. I am embarrassed and humbled in a way that I don't know I've ever been. I know that I did nothing wrong. I know it's not about me. I know that the way that this man treated me was far beyond the scope of how human beings should treat other human beings. But I also know that I played a role in this because of course I did. I created chaos once again. I distracted myself once again. I ran full speed towards the beautiful feelings so that I could put as much distance as possible between myself and the bad ones. I also want him back. Isn't that awful? I want him to come to me crying, begging with some crazy explanation. A gun was being held to his head, perhaps. I want this to make sense. I live in LA now, which means that I hear the words, the universe is trying to tell you something, more than I'd like. But goddamn if I didn't get the message this time. And here is what the universe is telling me, in the most crushing way possible, because apparently that's how I have to hear it if it's going to get through. I have to stop running. I have to sit in my ugly, sad, shameful feelings, and I have to pick them apart bit by bit so I can see what's inside. I have to learn how to be with myself by myself. I simply have to stop looking for solutions to sadness, to loneliness, to fear that aren't right there in my own little brain and body and heart. I've said all this before. I know I have. I'm embarrassed to be saying these things again. I know that I might not even get it right this time. This lesson is not being learned as neatly as I'd like it to be. But here it is. Here I am, broken and putting the pieces back together, all by myself. Again. One more thing. When I got that first text, the one that hit me in the face, here's what I did. I picked up the phone and I called my friend Francesca. I walked straight out the door with her talking to me, telling me to breathe, and straight over to my neighbor Margot's house. I told her I needed to stay there, and she said, stay. Later that night, after the earthquake, Margot and me and her 3 daughters curled up together on the couch. I don't remember what we watched. I remember her youngest gave me a beaded necklace, one I'm wearing still, and that we made friendship bracelets from rainbow string. On that couch, with those women, I was held. I am not alone. I am loved. I am lucky. I have said all this before. I am ashamed I can so easily forget my own words. And so I'll say them again and again and again. And then, one day, I will believe that they're true. Now, after I published that second half of the story, the shame, I heard from other women that this man had done this too, almost to the word and to the date. From time to time, I hear from them still. 1 week, he's in love. 1 month, the breakup and the lie, followed by the next night, this late night call with an admission of truth. And I found out other lies he told. Of course, he lied about his job, his degree, where he'd gone to school, everything. I wish I could say that this experience made me stronger, but in the short term at least, it broke me. Even now, 2 years later, I'm dealing with the emotional repercussions of having fallen so easily for all those lies. It makes it hard to trust someone new. It makes it hard to continue to be this wide open, bleeding soul that I've always been, and I've always been willing to just hand over freely, believing, as I used to, that people are good. People care. You can trust people. Not always. It did make me more careful with my heart, though. I see now that my love is a precious thing that shouldn't just be handed over, no questions asked. In the weeks after pandemic restrictions lifted and the kids went back to school and I could finally stop running on the treadmill of my life, that's exactly what I did. I stopped. I slept, and I slept for hours during the day and for as long as I could every night. It scared me how exhausted I was. I've never even been a power napper. I told my therapist I was worried, and this is what she said. Life is a pendulum. You were out there in the trenches of single-parent pandemic life, and you did what you had to do, and you ignored what you needed, and now you've swung the other way. Let yourself swing, she said. You'll come back to center when you're ready. I think it's so with love, too. I'm swinging as far away as I can from the pain of being treated like I was nothing, not even worthy of the truth. One day, I know, I'll come back to center. When I'm ready. Thank you so much for listening. This is Jordan Reed, and this is the Ramshackle Glam audioblog.